He's been an Army officer, high school teacher, conservationist, activist, three-term mayor of Champaign, author, freelance writer, and local historian, as well as the subject of a Supreme Court ruling. Welcome, Dannel McCollum.
It's fine to be here.
Now, looking through your history, your name is familiar to many throughout our area, but it's also familiar to a lot of people nationally because of a landmark Supreme Court ruling that you were involved in. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I was more the fly on the wall. My brother was the cause célèbre, as they say. He was in a classroom situation where they had religious education classes that were really of a sectarian nature. My mother found that not in line with what she thought was constitutional. Tried to resolve the matter by discussions with the people who put the classes in and the school authorities. But they simply were not helpful to her. And, every once in a while history messes with the wrong person. And so she got herself a lawyer, and 2.5 years later, and a lot of money, the decision came down in her behalf. She was delighted when it was 8-1.
Now, you were young at that point. What was its impact on you growing up?
It made going to school probably less fun than it probably should have been. It's character building if you survive it, though. I mean, I look back and think what a wonderful family I had.
Well, your mother was quite a hero to many for taking on that fight.
I don't think she quite realized just how dicey it was going to be. But when she got out in the middle of a raging stream, a lot of people turned back. This was not something she was disposed to do. She slugged it out across the river, and really during the course of the case, when generally a plaintiff in this kind of a case is recruited, of course she was not recruited. She was the complaining party, and became really the field general of the operation.
What was its impact on you?
Oh, I think it probably encouraged a lot of skepticism about public affairs. Maybe that's what's made me something of a activist on various causes. I was quite active in the anti-war effort during Vietnam, and was, of course, totally distressed to see this country go to war again in Iraq, which was a terrible happening. I'm ready for some peace.
You returned to the University of Illinois several times to continue your education. You went off in another direction following in the 60s, in the late 60s, didn't you?
I went back a second time to get a degree in secondary education, and that prompted 6 years of teaching in junior high and high schools.
What many people seem to have a linear path in their life, and you have anything but a linear path. Can you explain the dots on the trail?
I got the degree in secondary education because I needed a job. But when I began teaching in Champaign, the Champaign system, I was asked to do a extracurricular activity, which I called outdoors and conservation. I had students out picking up trash, and the principal came to me and said, I want you to teach a class in it. And it was quite an experience. I had kids taking field trips to the sanitary district, hauled them out to the landfill. They said I didn't take them any place that was clean and it always smelled bad. So. But I was proudest of the paper recycling program because in the course of a year, we would pull out ledger paper. Now this is regular good paper, not newsprint. 6,000 pounds of paper. All classrooms eventually had boxes. I didn't have the power to order the boxes in classrooms, but the students said to the teachers that weren't cooperating, well, where's your box? And I had a lady friend at the time who said, if you're going to have and of course we had to collect the paper, sort it. Every week part of each class on a Friday, sorted paper. My friend said, if you're going to have students sorting paper during at class time, you better have a darn good reason. I was always asked to give talks here and there on conservation, and I remember the title of my next talk was The Educational Value of Sorting Paper.
This would have been when? The 60s?
In the 60s.
So this is before the environmental movement even started.
Well, it started for me much earlier than that. I remember of course, when I grew up as a grade schooler during World War II, we had salvage drives. And when the war ended, salvage drives stopped. I had to negotiate with a local trash dealer, Jack Marco, said, at least will you take my cans if I drive them down there and give them to you for nothing? But it was very disappointing to see that stop. But it was so ingrained in me that recycling was just something that we called it salvage or that sort of thing. But it was just a shame that it ceased, just plain ceased. I couldn't quite understand part of the government's rationale was to keep the people on the home front involved. And I've heard subsequently that some of the stuff we collected probably was thrown away or not used. And
it was still symbolic, though.
It was symbolic, and it's unfortunate that not only at the same time that we were salvaging and saving stuff during the war, shortly thereafter we had this mushroom of human consumption, of consumerism, and at the same time, and of course the proliferation of packaging, and at the same time we went from the dump, which cities had, where you just went out and dumped it and they set it on fire and tried to burn it to reduce the volume, to the, quote, sanitary landfill, which was anything but sanitary. I hated landfills. So that probably really put me over the edge in terms of getting interested in conservation. I use the word conservation because I'm a conservationist. I've always been, as long as I can remember.
And is that different than an environmentalist?
I think it's different in the sense that there's a certain practical aspect of what will work. It's not what would be the best in all possible worlds, because we can't do what's best in all possible worlds. And I've had more than a few encounters with the environmentalists. I remember when we were working on the boneyard improvements, which kept the water. I got the university's boneyard part of the campus dry out of with the boneyard movement, and the environmentalists just fought us on our efforts to try to do something. It was even suggested by one environmentalist that we buy all the buildings in Campus Town and really convert the boneyard to a little natural prairie stream, which it never was. It was a swale. We improved it when we paved streets and had to get rid of the water. So anyway, it was an exasperating 4 years fighting for the getting the boneyard. In fact, it was probably 8 years getting the boneyard project done through the city government.
Now, the boneyard was an issue here for a long time, I gather.
The floods go back to the turn of the century. Fortunately, when I was trying to get the boneyard fixed, we had, every time the interest began to drop a little bit, we had a flood, a strategic flood. Also, at the time, the university chancellor was Mike Aiken, who was, in my view, an outstanding administrator. He was kind of a short, rumpled guy who you underestimated at your risk. And I really liked Aiken. He worked with us, realizing that the university would be the biggest beneficiary. But I've also said on many occasions that there wouldn't be one new building on Green Street if we hadn't got the water off of it. And that we did.
And Lake Neal, I've heard references to also.
The tracks at where John Street hits Neal Street. It used to be a small swale stream, very small stream. But when it got built up around it, of course, paved streets, roofs, and so forth, the water in a good storm collected, and once the stream was paved over, headed down toward the railroad tracks at a good pace. When it got to the railroad tracks, there was a conduit under the tracks, but it was not sufficient, which meant that you had Lake Neal. In their wisdom, the engineers at the city decided we can fix that, and they put 2 5x5 box culverts under the railroad tracks, Lake 3rd and John, and Green, Lake 3rd and Green. We moved the water. Well, of course, the water at one point, which really was a benefit in a way, flooded the basement of the new engineering library, doing several $1 million worth of damage. That caught people's attention at a time when I was really having to fight with the council to keep this project going ahead.
With the completion or recent completion of the Boneyard project, it's hard to imagine the magnitude of it before it was built. I mean, it was a huge undertaking.
Collectively, with the area from University South through Scott Park and the West Branch, which is accommodated by a huge hole in the ground, that took almost 12 years to complete. And it was probably represented the biggest single public works project in the history of the city. I mean, probably 30, 40, $50 million. It was a big job.
It would be hard to imagine if it had not happened where Champaign and the university would be today.
There would be no tall buildings on Green Street.
Interesting. Now, up until the 80s, you had not entered politics officially. You had a lot of opinions, but something changed.
There was a vacancy on the council. I was a little tired of the good old boys I thought were running the city. So I went to a lady who was up on her numbers, a political science teacher at Parkland, and asked her to run for the position. I'd be her campaign manager. She politely declined. I approached another lady up on her numbers. She declined. And here I had offered to be their campaign manager. I was willing to do my bit. The third woman said, "If you run, I'll be your campaign manager. Rule, do not deliver yourself into the hands of an efficient woman." So I wound up on the city council. After 3.5 years, I decided I wasn't really making the imprint that I had wanted to. At least for the expenditure of time, I was not getting the results I wanted. So it was either up or out. And I ran against an incumbent and 2 other people. In the primary, I finished second. That meant it was down to just 2 of us. And the incumbent, unfortunately for him, didn't even place. He was 3rd man out, which was, so he was not in the general election. And with a great deal of support for my opponent in the local newspaper, I still managed to win. Nothing like knocking on 9,000 doors.
Just sheer hard work. So you were passionate about it then?
Well, I would say that I always have referred to coining a phrase from Henry Mencken. It was a bizarre jest of the gods that I ever wound up mayor of Champaign.
Now, you were not without controversy during your term. One of the more visible historical markers was Gay Pride Day being announced jointly, correct?
That was really quite an interesting 2 weeks. It played out over 2 weeks. Robert Michael Doyle, an activist, asked me if I would do a gay pride proclamation. I said, of course. And he said, well, I want the mayor of Urbana to do likewise, a joint proclamation. And Jeff Markland, who was mayor at the time, agreed. So we issued the Gay Pride Proclamation. Somehow the network of probably the more evangelical-oriented groups seemed to have done a call around. When I showed up at City Council Monday morning following that, every line to City Hall was lit up. And I realized that well, first of all, the demand of the people who had called and had received when somebody had answered the phone and said they wanted the proclamation to be withdrawn. Well, I wasn't going to do that. It was not in the family. I mean, my mother didn't back down. I didn't intend to back down. I told the secretary, cancel everything I'm doing for at least today and maybe tomorrow. We'll see how it works. I'll talk to everyone who calls. Just take a number if I'm on with somebody else. I'll call them back. And I did. I spent the better part of the first 3 days making phone calls or answering them. And it was what I thought I was trying to do was at least provide them what they should have learned in civics class. People told me I would never be reelected, and I said, well, but Jeff Markland stood firm on this as well as I did. I didn't call him, we didn't talk, but he did. He stood firm on it as well. And by Wednesday or Thursday, the calls, which had been predominantly, overwhelmingly vilifying us, began to think, as more sober people began to think about it, the ratio began to change. It was kind of interesting that the managing, I should say, the operator of the News Gazette, John Hirschfeld, did a commentary on it. But then I'd been kind of quiet to just let the thing drop. But he went after us, and there's a little article, column in the paper, and so I took a deep breath, and I really told him what I thought. But it was, in fact, the gays were a protected, specifically protected group in our human relations ordinance. Besides, even if it wasn't, I would have done it. But the fact is that it was the right thing to do, and I'm glad I spent a little time thinking about it. Even the council got involved, and they were going to take over the mayor's prerogatives of issuing proclamations. Now, my first
take that
thought,
away?
Yeah. My first thought was, I'm a mayor. I'll proclaim anything I want to proclaim. But I thought about it, and I asked the secretary, Phyllis, put down all the proclamations that I've issued since I've been mayor. You know, Dairy Princess Day and Good Complexion Day. I mean, and I sent that out to the council. And I remember one of my favorite council members, John Schumacher, slapped the memo on the table, and he said, "I'm not going to fool around with this." Now, of course, if I had alienated the council, which my first inclination was to do, I would have had bad relations. It was just best that they understood, hey, maybe this is, we have no business in fiddling with this.
Now, John Hirschfeld also had a radio show. He described he was a little bit ahead of his time, it sounds like.
It was kind of funny because I actually was on Ricochet one time, and he started to say something good about me, and I said, "John, be careful, you're costing me votes."
You continued then to move into out of elected role, but you far from retired. The Virginia Theater, which now is one of the the crown jewels of Champaign, was in a transition period.
I had managed to get the council. We had leaned on the owner, Karasotis, to do upgrades to the building, because it was, even after it stopped showing pictures, it was a entertainment venue, and a local couple had kept it operating, for which I was deeply grateful. It would have closed like the Orpheum, and then we would have had a major deterioration of the building. But we kept pressuring the owner, Karasotis, to make these code upgrades. And we kept leaning on him, and we had a code inspection of the place. We pretty well identified what had to be done to make it safe by modern standards. the building had survived very well, but the fact is it was built in 1921. And this was in the mid-'80s. And after looking at what happened to the Orpheum, I was at the position of time was not on the side of the Virginia. We needed to do something. By leaning on Karasotis long enough, he reduced the price to $500,000, and I got the council to foot the purchase. It didn't work out quite the way I wanted. I wanted the city to buy it. The council would go along with us loaning a not-for-profit the $500,000 to buy it. That didn't work out too well because the not-for-profit just simply couldn't raise the money to either pay the city back or even keep the building going. And so it's been a struggle. I have to say that we got a major boost from Robert Tolson, who was the general manager of the Park District and an outstanding public administrator. He and Steve Carter just stand miles above every other public administrator I ever met. And Bob decided that the park should take it over. So I lobbied, although I was out of office, to have the city forgive the debt. And the park has really run with it.
Well, it really was a very key element in the rebirth of Champaign, at least the downtown area.
Well, I was interested in old buildings to start with. I finally, because we were losing old buildings so fast, got the council to agree to allowing the liquor commissioner, the mayor, to issue A liquor licenses, that's the tavern license, to anybody who would redo a building of above a certain square footage. They had to do a certain square footage. The building had to be older than 1940. Now, functionally, that meant the building was back before the Depression, because there was no building going on during the Depression. Then you had World War II. There was no building going on there. So it really functionally, it made it sound more reasonable. But the fact was it was aimed for buildings that were mid-20s or older. And there's a lot of bars downtown. My rationale was not that I wanted to create more bars in the downtown, although I did want to support the downtown becoming a venue, an entertainment venue, which it is more than done. But it was you'd have a redone building. You had a building that could, if the bar failed, then somebody else could use it, and it worked out pretty well.
This area, one of the signature items is that there are still streets paved with bricks, and that's something that we perhaps take for granted but shouldn't.
I was involved in affairs long before I was a politician. I don't think I was ever a politician, even before I got elected to public office. They got some revenue sharing money, and unfortunately, when you don't have to levy the money, when you don't have to scratch it out of the taxpayers directly, it comes as a gift from Disneyland East, Washington, D.C. You don't have the same sense of responsibility for it. And they were wasting away a good deal of it overlaying brick streets. Well, brick streets were made by at the time 80, 90 years earlier, and they were still there. They were the best pavements we ever laid. They'd been damaged by the fact that when you did a utility work, you had to dig out the bricks, and then you put a big ugly patch on it. I decided that I was going to save the brick streets. So I went to the public works director and I said, Art, who I liked, Art Dillman, I said, Art, this is before I was elected or anything. I said, if you overlay another street, I'm going to have to fight you on it. And they kind of laid off the overlay. When I got elected, then I wrote an ordinance which stated that if you had to dig out a street, either whether it was a city or a private utility, you had to put the bricks back. That led to my contention that it was far cheaper to, even though it was expensive to fix a bad spot on a brick street, far more expensive, it was better than overlaying a whole street after the overlay failed. So the city actually now went into a project of taking out all the patches and putting bricks back. We bought 500,000 bricks from somewhere else we still have stored, which we used to. And about every other year, there's a brick street project where they repair a small section of brick streets. So we still have today 9.5 miles of brick streets in Champaign.
That's fantastic. And in the long run, it turned out to be more cost effective.
Well, I certainly don't think that it was inordinately expensive to do it that way.
Now, you ran for public office one more time in 2002. What was that experience like?
I was asked to run for the state senate. There'd been a redistricting, and it looked like a district that was competitive. I wanted David Thies to run. I couldn't persuade him to do it, but they decided that I had the most name recognition, so I did. It really turned out to be one of the worst experiences of my life. The state Democratic Party obviously was backing me, but I would have been better off without any of their help. They wanted attack pieces and stuff. Well, I'm not that way. I tried to tell them, sell me. I'm the candidate. Don't forget about the other guy. But it was a hair-thin vote. I lost by, out of, I think, 52,000 votes, about 0.5%. And that was a seat that had been held by Republicans forever. But I decided, even though I worked hard to win, because people had expended money and time and other resources to help me, my wife and I decided before the vote I'd be better off losing.
Well, somehow I don't think you've given up yet. You've led by example your entire life, and we're very appreciative of you, Dannel McCollum, because you are truly an Illinois pioneer.
Well, thank you. I'll take the compliment. Thank you.
And for Illinois Pioneers, I'm Mark Leonard.